Well, hi to everyone joining this self-knowledge course. Today, we are going to be studying the second topic of this course, a very interesting topic in which we are going to talk about the mysteries of death. Well, the objective of today's lecture is that we can understand what death is, since death is actually an important part of life, and we are going to see what is the process that the disembodied soul goes through when the physical body dies. What are those things that people experience when they have, for example, a near death experience? You're going to see here why is that. And we will see if we only live once or if we live successive existences, right? We are also going to study what types of death exist, and we are going to see something interesting. We're going to see how death liberates in all cases, okay? And we are going to see also what dies and what does not die at the moment of the death of the physical body. Well, actually, the ignorance of death has made that most human beings fear it, and that they then see in death the goal or the final objective of everything. But if a person truly understands what death is, they will no longer be afraid of it. They will be able to enter into the mysteries of life and death, right? Actually, we are right now very attached to life, and we are very afraid of death because we don't know what happens after death. We may have many theories, we may have many concepts about death, but we don't have a real experience about this, right? And some people say, for example, that we only live once, right? And because of that, they tend to give free rein to all their desires or the things they want to achieve in this life, because you only live once, right? But it is true. Other people say that after death we go, for example, to heaven, or that we go to hell, and that process will be eternal. That is another concept, right? Others say that we die, and that after we die we are reborn. That death is just like changing clothes, right? And the problem on all these concepts is that since we don't have, or since we don't know how to directly verify the veracity of those concepts, because we don't know how to go to death and return, right? We settle for believing or not believing what seems more logical to us or not, or what adapts to what we have been taught about these concepts. And all this thing about death just remain in our minds as unproven concepts, but of which we are very sure, right? So it is important that we start to develop for example, the conscious astral projection. In the next lecture, we are going to explain in detail how to achieve a conscious astral projection, so we can do directly this kind of investigations with the higher parts of our inner being in the superior dimensions. And it is important that we understand that everything that we are going to talk about in this conference that we are studying today and throughout this self-knowledge course can be verified by each one of you. This is not an information intended to generate another concept for you to believe in this or not, or to doubt about it, but it is intended to motivate you to question yourself, right? To move on investigating all this information, right? So that you can know by yourself the reality of the things that we are sharing here with you, okay? And well, let's start talking then about death. Let's see this. Once we leave the source from where we all came, that some call the sacred absolute sun, and we arrive at this physical manifestation, we are actually given 3,000 opportunities on that known as the wheel of samsara to try to achieve self-realization. At each of these opportunities, we are going to be creating a soul, going through a process of evolution through different kingdoms of nature, right? And upon reaching the human kingdom, we have the right to 108 human physical bodies in each one of these turns, right? That means that we have the right to return in 324,000 physical human bodies passing through physical death in this physical opportunity that we'll have. And all that process will happen mechanically if we don't understand the importance of this kind of death that is known as psychological death, because that is the one that allows us to reach the intimate self-realization of the being in one single existence. Okay, we are going to study what is this psychological death also today, right? But well, the reason to live is to die. Actually, we have no other task than this. You are born to die, and you die to be born, because as you saw, we live successive existences. And death actually is something important, because you can see that if the germ doesn't die, the plant just doesn't grow. Okay, death is only the end of something, but at the same time, it is the beginning of something. Since life is tied to death, just as death is tied to life. So we live and we die, and just to live once again. But the important thing is to understand that death liberates in all cases, right? For this reason, it's important to know that there are three types of death, which are closely related to each other, that one cannot be studied without studying the other two of them. And one of them is the death of the physical body. That is actually a liberation process, because you see that when, bueno, you have to experience that when the physical body dies, you are releasing yourself from the heaviness of the third dimension, of all the pain of an illness, for example, of, well, all the psychological and physical issues that you have. You just liberate yourself at the moment of dying, right? But it's also the second death. That is another process of liberation that we will study today. Is a way to liberate from the ego, but in the second death, you don't rescue the wisdom that you can rescue if you practice the psychological death. That is like the true way of liberate ourselves, but rescuing all the wisdom and all the love that we came here to this existence to drag from it. And well, let's study each of these deaths in detail. Let's first study the process of the death of the physical body. Actually, this process begins with a state of catalepsy that lasts 72 hours, where the physical body is apparently dead, but actually this state can be suspended at any time, with which the dying person will return to the body during these 3 days or 72 hours, right? There are many stories in history of people who have come back from death during that time. uh, there are stories of people who were buried alive, actually, and their coffins were found, scratched from the inside, or their corpses found with these gestures of despair, because they returned to their body, but they were already, buried. And well, unfortunately, today almost no one is aware of this death process, previously known by all the tribes and people of the planet. They uh, had this funeral process of 72 hours, but right now people is being buried alive, or autopsied before the 72 hours are up. And this could be avoided if people knew more about the process of death, and we're not also so afraid of it. And if we went back to that old way, having these 72 hours funerals, all this could be avoided. And well, after those 72 hours, it can be confirmed that the person, yes, died. This, unless the body was dead in, let's say, an accident, something that make the body already unable to receive the soul back again. Okay, and what happens during those 72 hours? Well, actually, three process of judgments are held, And well, these are this. The first judgment, of course, in the first 5 minutes, the disembodied person makes like a conscious retrospect of each one of his acts in that existence. And in that retrospection, we'll be carefully observing each event of the lived existence, each one of his acts in that existence. And upon reaching the moment of his birth, that a person will compare the lived existence with the plan he had for that existence. That is the reason why people who have these near death experiences say, for example, that they have seen their life flash before their eyes like a movie in retrospection. It is actually this first trial. And well, the objective of this first judgment is to review each of the acts of existence to make us aware of them, right? Each person brings when being born a plan for that existence, and for that reason it is extremely important that we begin to ask ourselves, to inquire into our own consciousness, to find the answer to the question, what is the purpose of my existence? Because it is actually really sad to arrive at this physical existence and spend all the time that we must live so absorbed in the realities of life, that we are there, so absorbed in work, in problems, in pleasures and distractions, that we never take time to ask ourselves, what did I really come this world for? And we just let another existence pass without achieving that purpose, okay? And well, this first judgment is made by our own consciousness, okay? Now, there is a second judgment that takes place approximately 24 hours after the start of the death process. This trial takes place in front of the Lord of the Divine Law. This trial, or in this one, two things will be considered. The first is the atomic weight of each one of our psychological elements or psychological defects, how much they weight at that moment. They will weight our pride, for example, our lust, our laziness, our greed, our envy, our tyranny, our jealousy, our selfishness, for example, and they will compare this weight with the one that these defects had in the end of the previous existence, to see how much they have increased or decreased in this one. It is actually very common, if we don't work on ourselves, which is the most common thing, that the atomic weight of our psychological defects increases from one existence to the other, because we tend to spend our time so fascinated, with this world, and we let all those psychological defects to constantly express in ourselves, and every time they do so, they come and feed on our energy, so they increase. That is why they have the power to subject us more and more, and well, the second thing that is considered in this trial will be the number of psychological defects that we have at that time. And this amount is going to be compared with what the amount that this dying person had at the end of his previous existence, to see if they increased or decreased in this one. And well, that is the second judgment, in which our psychological defects will be counted and pondered, right? And the third trial or judgment takes place approximately 48 hours after the start of the death process. This one, the soul of the disembodied person is going to be taken to the court of the objective justice, and there three things will be judged. First, the weight of the good and the bad actions of each of these selves or psychological aggregates. They're going to be there in the balance. Those are the acts of the existences. How many good acts or how many bad acts that person had in that existence. All the good and bad deeds will be taken into consideration in this judgment, right? We can see actually this judgment represented in this Egyptian painting known as the Judgment of Osiris, which represents the soul of this incarnated person taken by Anubis, which is the guy with the mask of a jackal. And there we see a scale where the heart is weighted on one side, and on the other one is the feather of truth. Right there is represented this third trial. And well, the second thing that will be judged here will be the number of times that each one of these psychological defects manifested itself in the existence. And the third thing will be the measurement of the fire in the spinal cord of that person. And with this, they would see if that person worked on liberating and awakening his consciousness and on raising the sexual energy or kundalini through his spinal column, fixing the liberated consciousness there. And well, those are the three trials. After that process of judgment, the addition and subtraction of fraction is made, with which several things will be determined. Here, they will give like a verdict. They will determine the karma that this soul will endure in its next existence. Also, here they will design or determine the electropsychic design of the new personality. That will define everything, every aspect of the new existence that will be developed in the next one. All the things that person will have to live, the destiny of that person will be designed there. And well, all this if the person has to write yet to a new existence, if he hasn't exhausted his 108 existences as a human yet. And after this trial, and all after this verdict, Anubis, the hierarch of objective justice, will order the angel of death to cut the silver cord of the disembodied person to release that soul from the physical body. But before proceeding to this, doing this cut, this angel of death will ask permission to the divine mother of the dying person, because it is the divine mother who have like the last word in this. If authorized, he takes up to 24 hours to doing the cut of that silver cord with the death ray. But if the Divine Mother doesn't authorize the death ray because she considers that there are still things that the person must live, experience, or fulfill, for example, in that life, or decides to give that person another chance to achieve the purpose of his existence, then the person would return to the physical body before those 72 hours. If at any point during the process of death, those 72 hours, his divine mother decides that must return to life, will return to the physical body. That is why it's so important to wait those 72 hours before autopsying or burying the person, right? And well, if authorized, right, and the angel of death cuts the silver cord, then three alternatives open up to the disembodied. The first alternative, of course, if the person has not exhausted his 108 existences yet and still has another opportunity to try his self-realization in that cycle. Okay, in that case, his soul will be taken to a region known as limbo that is found in submerged caverns within the planet Earth, but in the fifth dimension, right? And there he will project all his life and will continue there with the sleeping consciousness. And there he will wait for his next physical body. The second alternative, of course, if the person has completed his 108 existences, and when measuring the level of fire in his spine, Anubis finds that he hasn't awakened and raised the sacred fire of the Kundalini through his spinal cord. And in that case, it is ruled as dry cane, and the verdict is to be sent to abyss, right? And then that soul is taken to the submerged infra dimensions of the planet Earth, where it will experience what is known as the second death, which I will explain in just a moment. And the third alternative, of course, if the person worked with the sacred fire and increased this level in his spinal cord. Then, in that case, Anubis, the hierarch of the divine law, will order a vacation in heaven, which is superior dimensions, okay? And the divine mother of that disembodied soul will take him to those superior dimensions, will give him strength and instructions so that in his next physical body, this soul will attempt a self-realization of his being. Actually, even if the person has just lived his 108 existence, if he works on himself and increases his level of sacred fire in his spinal cord in relation to the previous existence, he could be entitled to a 109 existence, right? And well, this is the entire process that the soul goes through when the physical body dies. Remember that. If you have any question about this, you can let your questions down there in the comment box, and there we will be giving you the answer, or if you want to share us some experience or reflection on this, it is very welcome. Let's now talk about the second death. The second death is the one that awaits the souls of people who exhaust their 108 existences without awakening their consciousness. When one doesn't work on ourselves, then the psyche or soul is lost at the end of 108 human existences. And the soul is taken to the abyss. It enters the nine Dante circles, from where it will not come out until nature finished disintegrating each one of the psychological defects that we were creating and feeding through our successive existences. And there, after thousands of years of suffering and decomposition, when the essence is completely pure, it is released from the abyss, and then the essence emerges completely liberated into the light of sun, where it will begin a new evolution process, starting again from the mineral kingdom of nature, starting, a new cycle in the wheel of samsara. And well, through this process, all the wisdom, all the love, and all the experience that this soul was taken during that turn in the wheel will be lost. And this step is what is known as the second death. As I was saying, it is a liberating process because it helps a soul that did not want to work on itself and was there just creating and feeding the ego, to liberate from all that ego, so it can have a new opportunity. When you don't decide to disintegrate your psychological defects voluntarily, then nature involuntarily will have to disintegrate them, right? And well, that is the second death. Let's now know what is the psychological death, the third type of death, and the most important one, since it is the one that will actually free us from the death of the physical body and from the second death. In addition, this death is what will allow us to free ourselves from suffering, from misery, and from that constant slavery to which each of our psychological defects subject us. We have within us millions of psychological defects that lead us all the time to make mistakes, that lead us to harm others, to harm ourselves, and that don't allow us to awaken our consciousness. Every time that we let any of these negative ways of being to manifest, it comes and steal the energy of our centers, lead us to make mistakes, right? And they are all the time growing bigger, and to gain more and more power to control us, right? For example, if we allow ourselves to constantly experience a state of anger, of impatience, of intolerance, of resentment for a long time, that defect will grow. The defect of anger will grow to the point that we will control our physical body for longer periods of time, and we will come to a point in which we define ourselves as an angry person because our angry defect is so fed that now we are like an angry person most of the time. The same we can say, for example, with sadness or with any vice. But let's talk about sadness. If we constantly let ourselves to feed states of desolation, of anguish, of bitterness, if we let these pessimistic thoughts to be there all the time manifesting in us, that defect of sadness will grow and grow until we become constantly depressed people, right? And well, actually, that is how we come to be depressive people. We let a sadness to come to feed on our energy and to subject us more and more. And the same goes for all defects like drugs, like pornography, like masturbation, like alcohol, like criticism, like violence, whatever. The more energy that a defect has trapped, the more it can enslave us. Thus, it is psychological death that will allow us to give death to all the psychological defects so that the virtues of the soul can be born in us. Because for something new to be born, something old must die. And as I was saying, we have within us millions of psychological defects that manifest in us in our daily lives, that drain our energies permanently and unnecessarily. We have defects of all kinds. We have anger, we have impatience, we have irritability, we have greed, we have ambition, we have worry, we have deceit, we have lie, we have fear, jealousy, we have lust, with a lot of defects. We have fornication, adultery, we have vanity, we have self pity, we have defects of suffering, defects of pride, defects of ill will, of antipathy, of laziness, of alcoholism, of begging, we have of waste, we have drug addiction, we have masturbation, we have gluttony, we have envy, we etc. etc. As Virgilio the Mantuan poet said, even if we had a palette of steel in 1,000 tongues, we wouldn't be able to enumerate all those defects that we have. And each of these psychological defects, has captured a small portion of our consciousness, which is what gives it life. When a psychological defect actually dies, then that trapped spark of consciousness that was the real part that was trapped in it will be released. And that way, we are going to become more aware people, more conscious people, right? But something important that we must understand is that if one of those psychological defects can be eliminated, all defects can be eliminated. If we can free one spark of this inner darkness, we can free them all. Okay. And if we free ourselves from all our psychological defects, we will have recovered all the consciousness, all the wisdom, all the love, and we will have integrated our own inner being, because these little sparks of consciousness trapped in the ego are actually part of our inner being. And that way, by integrating each of these sparks of consciousness, is how we are going to achieve the sacred individuality. That is why we say that the reason to live is to die, but to achieve the psychological death. And well, let's see how can we practice the psychological death. How is this practice like? You're going to see that it's very, very simple process to allow you to liberate your consciousness. Psychological death actually consists on 3 very simple steps. The first one is to discover a defect within us with the self-observation. To self-observe is to direct our attention towards our inner world, towards our interior, at every single moment, to observe the defects that are there manifesting in our mind, in what we are thinking, right? In our emotion, in what we are feeling, And when they manifest in us, for example, at a sexual level, throughout our body, making us talk, making us act, okay? That is self observation, directing attention inward to see the reactions that we have at each time, and immediately we observe an internal reaction in any of our internal centers. We must judge that reaction. We must reflect if that is a manifestation of our consciousness or if it comes from the ego. If it is any psychological defects, is this where this that I'm thinking is coming from? This that I'm feeling, who is feeling there? What defect is feeling there? This that I'm about to do, this desire that I feel, does it come from lust? Does it come from anger? Does it come from jealousy? Does it come from where? Actually, when we judge ourselves, when we when we enter into activity, this sense, this third eye, which is actually the sense of self-observation, to see clearly to our inside, to see what is going on inside us, and we judge ourselves, we receive the comprehension from here, from the pineal gland. We get to understand easily when something comes from an ego, when some manifestation in us comes from a psychological defect. Let's say that we are experiencing something that activates in us anger. If we observe ourselves at that moment, we are going to understand. If we judge the reaction, we're going to understand that what is moving in our emotion is actually anger. That what is moving us here to talk, to say something, is actually anger. That what is talking in our mind, making us remember this, making us plan this, is actually anger. That what is taking control of our body, that we are feeling like our blood is like burning, that we feel like all those tensions, actually we can understand that that is anger. And when we understand that, what can we do? We can eliminate that. We can eliminate that manifestation. Every one of those details that we are observing can be eliminated from us. The tensions, the thoughts, the emotions, the reactions, the desire to do this, to say this, can be eliminated from us. And we do so by asking the power of love of our consciousness, our own energy, which is our inner divine mother, to eliminate that defect. You can ask her mentally, my mother, kill this defect, give death to this defect, eliminate this defect, however you feel so, with just observing and understanding that that is a psychological defect, and to ask for death to each detail that you observe in your mind. Each detail, everything that it says is a detail. Everything that it makes you feel is a detail. In your emotion, everything that it makes you feel in your body is a detail. Every desire that you experience is a detail. You don't need to act mechanically under the desire of the defect. Actually, you can deny yourself. And deny yourself is to ask your inner mother to eliminate all of the defects of that defect manifesting that you are there observing and understanding. And you will experience the magic. You'll see how your divine mother, your own inner energy, start disintegrating all those details that you are asking for death for. The same if you are in a state of fear. The same if you're experiencing envy or any other defects. For example, let's say that you are experiencing lust because you saw someone who seems so attractive to you. And then in each part of your body, in each one of your energy centers, there starts to be a reaction. For example, you observe your sexual center and you notice that there is this sensation, this that you are aroused sexually. You can observe that, and that is manifestation of lust because that person seems attractive to you. If you observe yourself at the level of your instinctive center, you're going to feel attraction to that person, how something that is attracting you to that person, how You are feeling like a lot of tensions in your body that are moving you towards doing something, right? If you observe the desires, you're going to see that there is this desire to call the attention of that person, desire to go and copulate with that person. In the emotional center, you can feel, for example, these butterflies in your stomach. Like if you are in love with that person, you don't know that person, but right now you are in love. Actually, that is lust taking over your physical body. If you observe at that moment your intellectual center, that is your mind, you can see all the thoughts that are there. Going on in your mind. You are idolizing that person. You're imagining scenes with that person. And if you observe your motor center, you are going to see how you are compelled by all these eyes of lust manifesting to act in this certain way, to do this, to move like this. So you call the attention of that person. If you can at that moment be aware of all that is going on inside you, that is what is called self-observation. And every one of those details that you manage to understand that they comes from an ego, in this case from lust, can be eliminated. Divine Mother, kill this defect from me, eliminate this defect from me. And that is how you practice psychological death from moment to moment. You can also reflect on those defects to understand how they are there, manifesting all the times, how they are feeding on your energy, how they make you act mechanically, making all the time the same mistakes, leading you to be, in this case, unfaithful to your partner, for example, making you to all the time losing your sexual energy, for example. And that way, when you are gaining then comprehension, you start seeing more and more details, and you can come eliminating more and more of those details in there. You are rescuing all the wisdom and all the energy and all the love that these defects actually have trapped. That is the psychological death. I encourage you to practice it, to discover the magic, discover the liberation that you can do inside yourself from moment to moment. And well, now to finish today's topic, let's explain a little what is it that dies and what is it that doesn't die at the end of an existence, right? Well, what is it that dies? Together with the physical body, because the physical body does die by at the end of an existence, the vital body and the personality are the parts that die, right? They disintegrate at the end of an existence. The vital body is the energetical part of the physical body, and the personality is like that facade, that image of ourselves that we built in one existence, with our name, with our surname, with the things we like, with the education we receive in that existence. I am a doctor so and so. Actually, that doctor so and so will die, because that is not true. That is not real. That is just something built up in that existence. It is not true at all. And what is it that doesn't die? Well, the essence, the consciousness in us, is what is real, is what is immortal in anyone. It is the only true thing that we have inside. So it never dies. It has been the same from the very time we left the sacred absolute sun, and it will continue to be the same forever, because it is the part of God of each one, right? But we must know that also the psychological elements in which our essence is currently trapped, they also come back from one existence to another. They are strengthened in each one of those existences, and they don't die when the physical body die, because they have a portion of our immortal essence trapped inside of them, and that essence gives them life. So these psychological elements will only die if we exhaust our 108 existences as humans, and we don't decide to do the work of consciously eliminating them by practicing the psychological death. They will die in the second death. But if we willingly decide to eliminate them, through psychological death, they will all die in one single existence if we decide to dedicate our lives to stop living for the ego and for dying for the ego and living for our spirits, our consciousness. Okay, so that is how these psychological defects die. If we don't eliminate them in one existence, when we return to the next one, they will come back and they will take over the new physical body. They will start manifesting as we develop our personality. And if we were angry persons in the previous existence, we'll be angry ones in the next one. If we were homosexuals in the previous one, we are going to be homosexuals in the next one because they're still alive. Okay, if we do this work of eliminating all our psychological defects, of liberating all of our consciousness that is trapped in our ego, by practicing psychological death. And if we do the work to all these essences that we are liberating, all this energy that we are freeing for the ego, to make a wise use of it, transmuting that energy in the sexual practice, creating all of our existential bodies. And if we develop conscious love towards humanity by helping them to awaken their consciousness, then we are going to achieve the purpose of our existence. Then death we will no longer be able to reach us. Actually, if we do that work in one existence, we will become immortal beings with awakened consciousness, and we will be freed from the physical death and from the second death, and we will ascend to higher worlds of consciousness. Actually, that is the purpose of working on ourselves. And well, people, this has been today's topic. This is all about death and about the 3 types of death. Remember that if you have any question, you can leave all your questions there in the comment box. We'll be glad resolving all the questions you have. And we invite you to our next lecture that we will be sharing with you next week. If you are not yet part of our groups, WhatsApp or Telegram groups, here in the description of this video, you can find the link to join our groups to receive the lectures, complementary material on each one. Next Monday, we are going to be sharing with you a lecture on astral projection. There, we are going to be learning on different techniques to achieve conscious astral projection. We are going to be talking about some misconceptions that commonly we have on this topic. And there you can be solving also all the questions you have on astral projection. And well, thank you very much to all of you for participating in this topic. And well, see you the next time. Bye bye.